Good day, prospective evolutionist. You're reading this because you believe the human species is on the decline. You believe there is only one logical path forward. The human species must evolve. And you believe there is only one way to accomplish such a feat. Through technology. The industrial evolutionists have heard your call and share your interest. We've spent years researching this issue and believe we have found a solution. A way forward. If you're interested in learning more, we urge you to follow the directions to this address. Lucas held the flyer between his fingers, skimming it over once again. It contained a bunch of preachy nonsense about the glory of the machines and whatnot. Parts of it didn't make much sense, and the flyer itself looked as if it had been made in Microsoft Word in 5 minutes. Fairly ironic, considering it went on and on about using technology to its fullest and reaping the benefits of doing so. To put it lightly, the industrial evolutionist movement was not what he was expecting when he was told he would be investigating possible cultist activity. He had gone undercover before and dealt with overzealous religious people, but never a combination of the two. So it was with great uncertainty he agreed to investigate the industrial evolutionists. His boss hadn't told him much, or at least he couldn't remember much. His memory of the assignment's overview was a bit murky, but he was handed the flyer and told it would explain what he needed to know. The flyer had given an overview of the movement's ideals, the proper use of technology, humanity's dependence and continued dependence on machines, and the proposed evolutionary path humanity should take. But little more. He still didn't quite know what he was investigating. He was used to being on the lookout for possible cult activity, but nothing about the industrial evolutionist screamed cultist. Sure, they seemed like a bunch of misguided optimists following an unrealistic idea. The same could be said, whether true or not, about every religion. Still, the idea of posing as an initiative and infiltrating a cult was certainly intriguing. He looked out his car window at the evolutionist's so-called compound. In reality, the commune's pace of meeting equated to little more than a rundown warehouse, right smack in the middle of the city's industrial district. The place looked long abandoned. The windows were boarded up with rotting wood, and there were cracks in the concrete running up the walls. Chips and dulled red paint, and not a single mark of identifying the building as an industrial evolutionist meeting area. That raised a few questions right off the bat. Were the followers here illegally? And if so, for how long? Of course, it wasn't like he could ask the questions without arousing suspicion. Lucas gazed carefully at the types of people that casually strolled into the warehouse. Men, women, young, old, of all shapes and sizes, ducked through the door and out of sight. Most seemed to have an at best cautious and at worst paranoid look about them. They shifted from foot to foot uncomfortably and consistently glanced over their shoulders, checking to see if they were being watched, which in fairness they were. Lucas counted around 50 before he stepped out of his car and got into the cool night. The breeze nipped at the back of his neck as he checked the time. 11:50. Just about time for the meeting to begin. He pulled his coat up, his hat over his face, and thrust his hands into his pockets as he began to cross the street. He didn't make it far, however, before he felt someone crash in the front of him. He whirled around instinctively and saw a young woman, her head mostly obscured by a gray hood, smiling up at him in embarrassment. "Sorry," she exclaimed quickly. "I wasn't paying attention, and you just jumped out of your car, and I totally didn't see you there." Lucas smiled back calmly, wanting to have a friendly demeanor towards these followers. "It's all right," he said coolly. "Hey, I'm actually fairly new here. Are you part of the industrial evolution movement? I could use some directions and guidance if you could." He motioned to the warehouse, letting his words trail off. "Oh, no, well, I am, but..." She hurriedly fished a crumpled flyer similar to the one Lucas held out of her pocket. "This is my first meeting, too. I got this letter about a week ago, and it seemed sort of interesting, and I wanted to learn more, so I came here. Is this the right place? I know you said Assuming the address on the paper is correct, then yeah, this is the right place. Right, but I don't know, it just seems sort of like gross and all broke and ugly. I don't know. I just kind of expected more. Hey, if you don't mind me asking, where did you get your letter? Do you have one? Right? A flyer like this one? She held up the paper. I got one in the mail, like you. In all honesty, Lucas hadn't thought about it, nor had an answer prepared. Hers seemed to work well enough. Oh, you dead? Oh, cool. Yeah, weird, right? Hey, they just know where to send one? Lucas took note of her uneasiness around the subject. Oh, hey, I'm Alyssa, by the way. She stuck out her hand eagerly, changing the subject. Ian James, Lucas replied, shaking her hand graciously. It's getting pretty chilly out here, Alyssa. We should head inside and hope someone else can tell us where to go from there. Smart, she agreed, and followed beside him as he crossed the street. They walked in silence as Lucas thought to himself, she's a bit enthusiastic, seems harmless. If this is the kind of company the industrial evolutionists are attracting, then there shouldn't be any real issues. They approached the rusted and faded door to the warehouse. Lucas held the door for Alyssa. She smiled and pretended to curtsy before heading inside. Lucas followed her in, instantly feeling a wave of warm air across his face. He stepped inside, gazing at the 60 or so people around him who chatted amongst themselves happily about a variety of mundane topics. The room was well lit, attributed to a series of lights overhead, yet there was a hazy fog above the crowd, dimming the lights and insulating the heat. It smelled of coal, smoke, and another odor Lucas didn't quite place. Rows of folding chairs had been set up in front of a wooden platform that acted as a stage of sorts. On top of the platform sat a podium and a large rectangular object with a cloth draped over it. Lucas tried to make out any features of the object, but they were obscured by the cloth. The object was around 30 feet long and 20 feet high. The fog around the room seemed to emanate from beneath the cloth. Ian! Lucas looked about and saw Alyssa sitting down, patting a seat next to her. She had since removed her hood and let her long brown hair flow down to her shoulders. Lucas made his way over to her and sat down, deciding it's best to try and blend in instead of immediately asking questions to the other followers. A few of the other people had sat down as well, scattered amongst them. Scattered amongst the room, but most had stood in groups. Lucas listened in on some of the nearby conversations.
Who do you think it'll be tonight? I'm going to volunteer, but I doubt Father Mason will select me.
I see there are some new people here. It's really good to see that the movement has expanded its appeal. God knows we'll need them.
Sacrifice? No. But the merging of one being into another. Sacrifice is too broad of a term.
That last one made Lucas a bit wary. Most casual conversations didn't revolve around the term sacrifice. He wished he knew what led up to that line, but couldn't directly ask without raising suspicion. Something was wrong, but he didn't have any evidence or ideas as to what it was. He didn't let his concern show on his face, however, instead staring straight ahead, emotionless. After a good while, he turned to Alyssa, who had been humming an uneven tune to herself amidst the commotion. So, he began, catching her attention. Do you know anything about the industrial evolution movement? She scratched the back of her neck and paused before answering. Not much. I read what the letter said and decided to do some further research on the internet, but that's about it. I get the gist about what the movement is about, but not more than that. Really? What did you find online? I didn't even think to look anything up. Truthfully, Lucas had done extensive research over the internet, but had been unable to find any mention of the industrial evolutionists. He was surprised and a bit suspicious that Alyssa had dug anything up. Well, as you can probably guess by the name, it's an extension of the Industrial Revolution. Or at least, the basic idea of the revolution is like machinery revolutionized and continues to improve the human lifestyle? So, wait, that's a bad way of putting it. So, think of it like this. Machinery is a natural extension of humanity and thus should be focused for advancing the human species. It's the next step in evolution. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Good. That's the core belief behind the movement. There's her tone grew uncomfortable. Other parts of the movement centering around the worship of some grand machine entity. But I didn't think that was really... Now Lucas was interested. Hang on. What kind of worship? Tell me about this entity. Oh. Well, a name kept popping up, so I read through the articles. Sosatus. I don't really know anything else. Who is this Sosatus? Some kind of god? Or a demon, maybe? I don't really know. I think demon would be closer than god, but that's probably not the best term to use.
Hail Sosatus, the infernal machine!
Lucas and Alyssa turned to the voice behind them and saw an older, grimy man coming towards them.